Good evening. We begin tonight with that horrific and deadly suspected terror attack in New Orleans. Bourbon Street, one of the most popular party streets in the country, turned into a site of carnage as crowds rang in the new year. At least 15 people are dead and dozens others injured. Graphic video shows the chaos unfolding overnight when a man driving a pickup truck that was flying an ISIS flag rammed into New Year's revelers in the popular French Quarter and then opened fire on police. People seen running for their lives as gunshots ring out. We'll hear from survivors about how they fled into a nightclub to survive. Police say the truck drove around police barricades and into the crowd before crashing. Then a few blocks later, a shootout between law enforcement and the suspect. At least 2 officers hurt and the suspect killed. Heavy bollards. The big question tonight, rather, is were there enough physical security measures in place on one of the biggest party nights of the year, and as the city prepared to host a highly anticipated college bowl game? Heavy bollards like the one seen in this rendering were not there, but why? Does it have something to do with the upcoming Super Bowl that is set to be hosted in New Orleans in about a month? We're getting new details by the minute, but here is what we know so far. All right, officials, they're identifying the suspect here as 42-year-old Chasma Din Jabbar. He is a U.S. citizen from Texas and an Army veteran who was honorably discharged in 2020. The FBI releasing this photo of him, asking the public for any information on the suspect. Inside the crashed vehicle, investigators say they found a long gun, explosive devices, and 2 other potential homemade explosives that were planted near the vicinity of the crash. The FBI characterizing this as an ISIS-inspired attack. And moments ago, President Biden speaking to the nation about the attack.
I know I can speak for all Americans when I say our hearts are with the people of New Orleans after the despicable attack that occurred in the early morning hours. To all the families of those who are killed, to all those who are injured, to all the people of New Orleans who are grieving today, I want you to know I grieve with you. Our nation grieves with you.
Also tonight, that blockbuster college football matchup, the Sugar Bowl, postponed due to safety concerns. And as New Orleans remains on high alert, we are also following some breaking news in Las Vegas, where a Cybertruck exploded outside of the Trump Hotel, killing 1 person and injuring 7 others. Police are investigating it as a possible act of terrorism. We'll have more on that in just a few minutes. But back in New Orleans, more shock and questions. Tom Llamas is there and leads off our coverage.
In the opening hours of the new year, terror on the streets of New Orleans. Cell phone video capturing the scene of bodies sprawled out along the city's famed Bourbon Street.
Responses from Allen Bourbon.
The wounded being treated while still laying in the road.
We're dealing with EMS right now. Right now, we're working in a triage area.
Video courtesy of EarthCam showing police racing towards the carnage where a driver plowed his pickup truck into the crowds in the historic French Quarter. In this video, you can see the truck getting around a police cruiser, blocking the entrance to Bourbon, then racing through the street packed with revelers, killing as many as 15 and injuring dozens of others.
He was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did. Because of the nature and the indices that we have on the scene, and we have enough information that the FBI will be taking over this investigation.
Police say the suspect started his attack at 3:15 a.m. local, first using his car as a weapon, mowing people down at high speed on the 3 blocks between Canal and Conti Streets before crashing into a crane. He died in a shootout with police. This video capturing the sound of gunshots. 2 police officers were shot and injured.
The guy in the pickup truck just punched the gas and mowed over the barricade and hit a pedicab passengers. And there were just bodies and the screams. I mean, you can't think about, unhear that. It was chaos and very, very scary. It was the most bizarre thing, like something that you, like the least expected thing, I don't even know how he managed to maneuver that with the amount of traffic and people that were still out.
The FBI, the lead agency on the investigation, identified the suspect as 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, a U.S. citizen from Texas, and they're still hunting additional potential co-conspirators.
We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible.
The FBI says Jabbar was driving a rented Ford pickup truck.
An ISIS flag was located on the trailer hitch of the vehicle, and the FBI is working to determine the subject's potential associations and affiliations with terrorist organizations.
The FBI says also found in the truck weapons and an improvised explosive device, plus 2 IEDs found elsewhere in the French Quarter were rendered safe.
After hitting the crowd, he exited the vehicle and fired upon local law enforcement. Law enforcement returned fire, and the subject was pronounced deceased at the scene.
According to Texas records, Jabbar had 2 misdemeanor charges in his past, one for theft and the other for driving with an invalid license. In a YouTube video posted 4 years ago, Jabbar identifies himself as a realtor and a Texas property manager.
I'm born and raised in Beaumont, Texas, and now live in Houston.
In the video, he says he spent 10 years in the military as a human resources and IT specialist. The U.S. Army confirmed he served in the regular Army and then the Army Reserves, saying Jabbar deployed to Afghanistan from February 2009 to January 2010 and ended his service at the rank of Staff Sergeant. President Biden today saying his reaction was one of anger and frustration.
I've contacted every agency in the federal government as well as the state. They're all coordinating to get to the bare facts. We know what the facts are.
In New Orleans, Bourbon Street now an active crime scene with authorities searching for answers.
We need the public's help. We are asking if anybody has any interactions with Shamsuddin Jabbar in the last 72 hours that you contact us. The FBI is asking the public's help.
And as we mentioned at the top of the broadcast, there are questions about what physical security measures were in place. We are hearing the city was in the process of replacing steel barriers when all of this happened. NBC's Jesse Kirsch has the details on that.
Hours after that bloody attack on Bourbon Street, tonight growing questions about the physical barriers used to secure the area. Devices known as bollards, typically short stainless steel posts, are often used in high-profile parts of cities and towns to help control crowds and vehicles. But early this morning on Bourbon Street, the bollards weren't there. New Orleans' mayor explained today that the system was in the midst of repairs.
Bollards were not up because they are near completion, with the expectation of being completed, of course, by Super Bowl.
The game set to be played in New Orleans next month. The superintendent of police says other barriers like police vehicles and officers were in place to secure Bourbon Street on New Year's Eve. But video shows how the attacker drove right around a patrol car.
So we did indeed have a plan, but the terrorist defeated it.
Anything that is currently in the midst of being repaired had a backup replacement for last night.
Vehicles and officers were there where all of those ballasts have been. We had that. We knew. So we did have it. And like I said, in this particular case, terrorists just went all the way around up onto the sidewalk.
Was someone getting up on a sidewalk considered impossible or nearly impossible, or was this not something you expected you would have to account for?
Yes, of course, it wasn't something we expected to account for.
New Orleans, the latest high-profile deadly ramming attack following the German Christmas market attack last month, the Berlin truck attack in 2016, and the one in Nice, France that same year. Jose Liris was visiting New Orleans and left the area just before the attack this morning.
The metal barricades were not up, just the standard plastic ones like you see there. There was police there at the entrance, a lot of police there, but the metal barricades were not up.
A city website showing what the new bollards may look like says the project is set to be completed next month. But a nationally televised college football playoff game is supposed to be played here tomorrow night. New Orleans City Council member Helena Moreno says the city is ready.
Do you think New Orleans can host a football game here this week safely?
I'm going to tell you this, that right now so many resources are being deployed down to the city of New Orleans that no doubt about it, we will host a safe game tomorrow. Everything from federal resources, state resources, additional intelligence, like you name it. It's like that's all happening.
And our thanks to Jesse Kirsch for that report. I'm going to send it back now to Tom Llamas, who is on the ground there in New Orleans. He picks up our coverage from here. Hi, Tom.
Ellison, I thank you for that. We are live here in New Orleans at the corner of Canal and Bourbon. Just over my corner here, that's where the carnage started. That alleged terrorist taking his pickup truck and going full speed around the corner, jumping the curb. That's how he got on Bourbon Street, going around that police car and just zooming down, starting his killing spree. Joining us now, joining Top Story Live, is Helena Moreno. She's the president of the city council in New Orleans. She's dedicated a lot of her adult life to both reporting on New Orleans and helping New Orleans out. So, Helena, as somebody who's from this area, who's grown up here and devoted so much of her life, I mean, how is the Big Easy doing tonight?
So, I mean, we're in shock. I mean, it's an incredible tragedy that we've suffered here in the city of New Orleans. And now we're all working through it together. I mean, for me as a city leader, what I'm looking at is how do we move forward to make sure that our city's secure, that our city is safe for tomorrow's Super Bowl, Sugar Bowl. And, you know, right now we do have all of our law enforcement partners, state, federal, local, all working together to actually show you all what the plan looks like for this Sugar Bowl and for also additional precautions that we're going to move forward with in the French Quarter. And it's everything from additional barriers to more police officers. As you see behind us, you know, this is the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. That's not Orleans.
Different area.
Different area. So we have, it's a multi-jurisdictional approach to policing New Orleans right now and making sure that everybody stays safe.
What have you heard about the victims that are recovering right now that are still being treated in the hospitals around New Orleans?
Well, I'll say this, you know, first of all, deepest condolences for anyone who was injured and, of course, those who lost their lives in this tragedy. Those who are injured, some have very severe injuries, some have more less severe, and they're in stable condition, like our police officers, the 2 police officers who were shot. But I will say this, you know, earlier today, a friend of mine called me because one of her friends was missing and was on Bourbon Street. And so she went over to University Medical Center with several folks who were with this individual, and his phone was pinging on Bourbon Street, and they couldn't find him in any hospital. And as I walked through this conference room where many of families in similar situations were in, their phones were pinging on Bourbon Street, but they couldn't be found at any hospital. Unfortunately, some of these individuals and families did receive some terrible news this afternoon.
It is terrible. I know it's very early in the investigation, but for our viewers across the country that are watching this, how would you explain why it wasn't more secure, why someone was able to drive down Bourbon Street? In years past, you guys had set up those barriers. They call them bollards. Something people in New Orleans know very well. They go up and down. They were being replaced for the Super Bowl. What happened?
So, from what I understand, you know, the bollards were under repair. There was an NOPD officer car that was there to try to prevent anyone from driving through. I will say this, that the bollards, they go up and down, but the sidewalk protection is still not what it should be. You can go do all these hindsight 2020 things, but I mean, I guess look at this sidewalk. There's no bollards on the sidewalk that's right behind you. But I will say this, it is critical and important that we take a look at this particular incident and see what was potentially missed. And not just on New Orleans on the local level, but what was missed potentially on the intelligence side. Who was this guy? Were there any red flags with this guy? You know, I saw you all reporting that apparently he traveled to Cairo. Did something happen there? Who was this?
Why were the signs missed?
And were there these signs?
Have you asked yourself why he chose New Orleans, right? Because New Orleans, it's a wonderful city. It's a special city. It's a unique city, but it's on the smaller side of big targets, if you will, around the United States. Do you think he saw New Orleans as a target because there were going to be a lot of people here for New Year's Eve, because of the Sugar Bowl, and maybe it was a soft target?
Well, I'll say this. This person chose to target America. That's who he really targeted. New Orleans just happened to be the victim this time, but who could it potentially be next time? And that is honestly the question that I'm asking. So, to the federal government, to the next administration coming in, what will you do to protect us as Americans from those who want to inflict harm on our country?
What was the connection? I know there was an apartment that the alleged terrorists had rented an Airbnb about less than a mile from here, not too far. And there was a fire there. Do we understand what happened there?
don't understand exactly what happened there. And as I said, you know, since the FBI is leading this investigation, it is a lot harder for me as a local official to get information from them than it would be getting information from our New Orleans Police Department. So there is some kind of connection.
Yeah.
And as you know, that there's also a search for additional people who may be potentially part of this as well.
What's your understanding of the IEDs, the bombs that were located, but they didn't go off around this area? Is that still the case?
That's my understanding. We know that our bomb techs were out here for quite some time.
Were they on Bourbon Street? Do we know?
It was, from what I understand, I think it was maybe on Orleans and Bourbon, somewhere like that. And our bomb techs were out here for quite some time, making sure that everything was secured. In fact, this was maybe around, I don't know, maybe like 10, no, maybe earlier, 9 in the morning. I was on the phone with our 8th District Captain and was talking to him to get a description of the scene, and he's like, council member, I would walk you through the scene, but I just can't right now because it is not safe for us to do so. So obviously, yes. So because of that, because that was still being handled at that
Elena Moreno, she's the president of the city council here in New Orleans. I'm sorry this happened to your city. I'm sorry this happened to your constituents. And we hope we get some answers soon.
Yeah, and Tom, thank you for your coverage. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So we're speaking to local officials. Helena was mentioning the national, federal officials as well. President Biden speaking to the American public moments ago, saying the FBI has been updating him on the suspect. As authorities say, we're seeing a growing number of terror threats in the U.S. NBC senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has the details.
Tonight, the nation's capital is under heightened security out of what police say is an abundance of caution, though there is no specific threat. With a slew of major security events this month in D.C., the January 6th anniversary, former President Carter's funeral, and the inauguration of President-elect Trump, federal authorities are on high alert.
Well, the reaction was one of anger and frustration.
While investigators have not yet determined a motive in the New Orleans attack, they say the suspect had an ISIS flag on his truck as he carried it out. There are also mounting questions about the Las Vegas explosion outside a Trump hotel. And in a sign of the growing danger, experts say the number of domestic terrorist attacks and plots against government targets alone, motivated by political beliefs in the past 5 years, was nearly triple the previous 25 years combined. The FBI has also been warning the threat from homegrown violent extremists that are jihadist-inspired is surging.
Since October 7th, though, that threat has gone to a whole nother level.
Add to that the unprecedented 2 assassination attempts this summer on then-candidate Trump.
Gabe Gutierrez joins us now live tonight. So, Gabe, President Biden addressed the nation a little while ago, as we mentioned. What more did you hear in that speech as we also try to get more information about that event in Las Vegas with the Tesla Cybertruck that blew up?
Yeah, Tom, look, President Biden calling it a despicable attack. And in his role of consoler-in-chief, he also said to the American public and to the people of New Orleans that I grieve with you. Now, earlier in the day, as you saw in that report, he had briefly spoken with reporters on the tarmac as he boarded Air Force One en route to Camp David. He had spent the New Year's holiday in Wilmington, Delaware. Now he's at Camp David tonight. He had shied away from discussing any of the details of this investigation like the White House usually does at such an early stage. His comments just a short time ago, there were about 5 minutes at Camp David, did go into more detail, and he did say and did address the potential connection that authorities were investigating any potential connection between the incident in New Orleans and the incident in Las Vegas. That's the first time we heard him talk about that. We also heard him talk about how the suspect in the New Orleans attack had posted ISIS-inspired videos on social media, and that is something that investigators were looking at. Now, Tom, this has been a very long day for the president. He's been briefed by top officials from the FBI and from the Department of Homeland Security throughout the day, but we had been waiting for the White House to put out a schedule of when the president might address all this. They waited pretty much throughout the day until we had more concrete information from federal authorities. But again, the president choosing to address the American people tonight with that 5-minute address from Camp David, talking about this latest apparent or potential terrorist attack on American soil. Tom?
Gabe Gutierrez for us tonight. Gabe, we appreciate your reporting. As I mentioned earlier, authorities are also investigating another possible terror attack, this time in Las Vegas. A Tesla Cybertruck exploding outside of the Trump International Hotel there in Las Vegas, leaving one person dead. Two senior law enforcement officials briefed on the incident tell NBC News the attack was intentional. NBC's Morgan Chesky has more.
Growing questions tonight into this Tesla Cybertruck turned inferno just feet away from the Trump International Hotel. The stunning scene on the Vegas Strip, now the focus of a federal investigation. Law enforcement officials confirming the Cybertruck was rented from the same company as the vehicle used in the New Orleans attack.
We're looking for secondary devices. We're taking it slow, and we are going to make sure that we remain safe in our community.
The blaze called in around 8:40 this morning appeared to erupt in seconds. Witnesses describing hearing a loud noise, followed by a smoky scene.
We saw a lot of smoke through the windows.
Inside the vehicle, fire crews discovered an unidentified body. The burst of flames also wounding at least 7 bystanders before it was fully contained. Tesla founder Elon Musk posting, "The whole Tesla senior team is investigating this matter right now," adding, "We've never seen anything like this." Retired ATF agent Scott Sweeto says video evidence may be telling in the investigation.
You can see multiple large flashes, and you also hear whistling sounds in that video, and those whistling sounds are very consistent with the sort of fireworks that you could buy as a consumer and set off.
Tonight, the Trump Organization thanking law enforcement for their swift response as federal investigators dig in. Morgan Chesky, NBC News, Las Vegas.
All right, coming up, we'll have much more special coverage live from New Orleans tonight in this special edition of Top Story, how officials are ramping up security for the postponed Sugar Bowl at the Superdome. Stay with us. We're back now with our continuing coverage of the deadly terror attack in New Orleans. As the investigation continues, city officials announcing that the annual Sugar Bowl game to be played at the Superdome just behind me over here, originally set for tonight, is postponed. The two teams, Georgia and Notre Dame, are now scheduled to play Thursday following today's deadly terror attack. For more on this, George Solis joins me now. George, we heard from Jeff Hundley, who is running the Sugar Bowl, and the decision was made, maybe some people might say a little bit late, to change the game to tomorrow. What's your understanding about whether it's safe enough to bring fans into the Superdome?
Yeah, well, one thing that's very apparent when you look just around any part of the city right now, the police presence is obviously huge. They have put up more barricades out there, something that they would have done, but now you see a larger police presence out there. You also have a number of UGA fans, a lot of Notre Dame fans here who are wondering the same thing. Should I go to the game? Even on the way here, some were just getting that alert that the game was going to be postponed. Many of them figuring, would it be safe? You heard from the governor today, from Jeff Landry, saying, your governor is going to be there, assuring, doubling down in a sense that they are doing everything in their power to make sure that game, that kickoff, tomorrow happens at 3.
Was there a concern for the victims here? I mean, that maybe it was just too soon, a day after this terrible event happened, 2 days maybe?
You know what? That was definitely a question and a point of mind that a lot of people had, and it was certainly raised today from many people, whether or not it's just in poor taste to have any of these bowl games, given what has been happening throughout the country today. Yeah. But so many people have also weighed in saying, well, we have to play this game. We have to take the precautions. We have to make sure it is as safe as humanly possible, but we have to continue living on.
They did a security sweep in the Superdome. Any concerns in there, or was it all clear?
All clear as far as we know. Obviously, they're going to keep putting the pressure on to make sure everything is tight. This might be one of the most secure areas in the country as far as that kickoff is concerned.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
Unfortunately, because of all the people that have died on New Year's Day. George Solis, we thank you for your reporting. I want to get to NBC's Tom Witcher for the latest on the investigation. He's been leading some of our coverage from the law enforcement side about how police were able to figure out who exactly this alleged terrorist was and what his possible motive is. Tom, get us up to speed on some of your latest reporting yet. Do we have any idea or a better sense of why this man chose New Orleans on New Year's Day?
It's a great question, and not only that, Tom, why did he choose this specific time? Because while there were certainly a lot of people that were out on Bourbon Street, it would not have been packed at the same way it would have been at 1 a.m. or at midnight. And as I heard you mention earlier in the show, you pointed out that this attack happened at approximately 3:15 local time. So why did he choose that time? Did he have some sort of knowledge that there would be a shift in police resources, or that things would be throttled back, or was he delayed because of the type types of devices that he tried to put out there, if he in fact was responsible for it. These are all important questions and will be questions that they'll look at as they try to develop a timeline. We did hear from the President of the United States, Joseph Biden, who said in a press conference that in fact, it was his belief, according to his discussions with the FBI, that this individual made a number of social media posts espousing his desire to kill and to do it for ISIS. He pledged allegiance to ISIS in those social media posts ahead of time. I'm told that there were significant recordings that he made not only most recently prior to this incident, but in the past several weeks and months, and that might be something that will be looked at. Not all of those videos and postings were perhaps public, Tom, but they'll look into that to get to the very question that you're asking for. Why New Orleans? Why this time? Certainly close to Houston, where he's from, so it's not a far drive, but Houston has its own first night event, so what was this all about?
Yeah. Tom, before we go, I do want to ask you, explain to our viewers, because I'm sure a lot of people are concerned about what happened in Las Vegas. Has there been any connection drawn to the two events?
Yeah, so the only evidentiary connection that we've seen here, Tom, is, of course, the fact that they happened on the same day. And then the second is that the same car rental company was apparently used. There's no other evidentiary connection at this point. So when you talk to top FBI people or top police department people here in New York or at some of the large police agencies across the country, and even the small ones, they'll tell you the evidence needs to lead the investigation. You can have certain ideas about what you want to look into, but ultimately how you determine what actually happened has to be based on the facts and the investigation as you develop it. And right now, the facts and the evidence that they're uncovering aren't really drawing a lot of connections other than these coincidences, but they'll continue to look at it, of course, and continue to look at what happened here. You're looking at the types of IEDs just based on the preliminary information that we have, what we saw in this truck versus what is believed to have been found in New Orleans, Tom. Two very different types of explosives and setups when it comes to the type of explosive that was used. The fact that there could have been remote detonation, that might be some commonality. So again, more things to ask questions about and look into, and that investigation is very much ongoing. The Las Vegas one is the one that you're standing in front of right now.
And then, Tom, before we go here, I do want to ask you, you said there was a heightened terror alert around the country. Was it just because of New Year's Eve, or was there other intelligence that led investigators to believe, Homeland Security, there might be an attack like this?
So two specific answers to that, Tom. Number one, there has been a heightened concern for a very long time in this country by the FBI, by the New York City Police Department, federal investigators across the country, major cities and major police departments about the resurgence of ISIS, ISIS-inspired attacks, ISIS-directed attacks, ISIS-K, which is based in Afghanistan, some successful attacks that have occurred around the world and some thwarted, like the Taylor Swift concert. And so I think this is a concern that was ready to be manifested here in the United States. Hopefully, Tom, we don't have too many more of them.
I agree. All right, Tom Winter, some terrific reporting. As always, Tom, we appreciate your time. Again, we are reporting live from New Orleans as we continue our coverage here on that terror attack that took place on New Year's Day early, just after 3 a.m. and just behind me here on Bourbon Street. At least 15 people have been killed in this attack. Several more are fighting for their lives right now in hospitals across New Orleans. Surgeons and doctors working around the clock to save those lives. All of this happening as the Sugar Bowl is set to take place tomorrow night. Thanks so much for watching this special edition of Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas, live in New Orleans. Our coverage continues.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.